Okay, you've asked for it. Let's talk about light. It's more than just bright windows or grow lights. It's a whole science, and I'm going to try to make it approachable. Stick around with me and let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Memo. This is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me. It's tropical houseplants. This video is a video that's going to continue the geeky kind of 101 plant science series, and I've done an entire playlist of videos and I will link it at the top of this video so you can click. But yeah, today I want to go into that notion of light. I know a lot of you in a lot of the comments have said, look, can you please do a video on light? Because that can be a bit of an intense topic, and it is. And I did my research on this, and I will try to simplify it as much as possible so that if not everybody, most people will understand. By this point, we all know that the kind of common edict of bright indirect light can be very difficult to kind of judge and adjust, especially if you're just starting off. And to be fair, a lot of people that have been doing this for a while are still mystified by what that actually means. So we'll dive into that as well. And in the process, I'll be myth busting that kind of notion that one size fits all when it comes to light. But let's start off lightly. What is light for plants? And a lot of the times, especially if you've been trying to do this for a while, or if you're kind of getting into grow lights a bit more, you might hear the expression PAR, P-A-R, and that is photosynthetically active radiation, PAR. And this, in the simplest of terms, is the light levels that the plants can use. So for a lot of our tropical houseplants, not all of them, this will be somewhere in the region of 400 to 700 nanometers. Don't worry too much about the metrics of the nanometers, just realize that this is a metric that people will use for light levels. Now, the other kind of measurement that you might hear people talk about when it comes to lights is lumens. And I'm gonna burst your bubble slightly here and kind of explain that lumens is something that we as humans use to understand a brightness of lights when it comes to what we see with our eyes. However, for most plants, what they can kind of grasp in terms of lights, that's probably the best word I can use there, is, and I've got my little iPad here because I'm never going to remember this entirely, what plants will actually see, not lumens, that what we use to judge light by, but it's something called PPFD. And I need, because photosynthetic photon flux density. There's a whole bunch of like science words for you there. But in the simplest of terms is what this is the light levels that the plants can quote unquote see or kind of appreciate or kind of gather from their environment, and also what is usable to them. So there is a slight difference there. For us humans, and this is the reason why there is a difference between kind of lumens and PPFD or even PAR, is we kind of see light. With the plants, it's not enough for what they can see in terms of light, but it's actually how many photons hit their leaves and they can kind of get the benefit from. That is the kind of real difference. We are more about what we can see. They are more about what's actually kind of scientifically affecting their structures. And just to make it a bit clearer, it's specifically the level of photons that are hitting their structures, so leaves, stems, all of these things, every second. So let's touch on natural light. And you can't touch on natural light, and by this I mean light that is coming in naturally into your house that is not grow lights, and it's not artificial lights. So the light that's coming in through your windows from the great sun outside. one of the most important things that you need to be considering at that point is the cardinal directions of your light sources. So in this case, I'm just going to assume that we're talking about windows. And by cardinal directions, I mean things like north, east, south, west. Which aspect is that window looking at? So if you really want to start geeking out and doing things a bit more scientifically when it comes to even the light that's coming into through your windows, not just the grow lights, because I know a lot of the people that have been growing with grow lights, you fall down the rabbit hole of kind of really researching kind of light and the science behind it, but I know a lot of people that maybe don't go into grow lights, maybe don't go into that much of the level, but there is a few things that you could do. So the one thing I would say is if your phone doesn't already have the option of being able to be used as a compass, there are loads of free apps on both Apple and Android that you can download, and it will use your phone to kind of act as a bit of a compass. So use that to figure out the direction that your window is looking at. Now, the big thing, and hopefully this goes without saying, this is very dependent on where you are based. Are you in the northern hemisphere or are you in the southern hemisphere? I'm based in the northern hemisphere, so I will talk to people on this video as if everybody's in the northern hemisphere. This is not me kind of ignoring the people in the southern hemisphere. The only thing that you might need to do with this, whatever I'm saying here, is just flip it on its side. So if I'm saying that south-facing windows are likely to have some of the brightest lights that you are going to be getting, in the southern hemisphere, it is likely to be your north-facing windows. See how that's different there? And essentially all of these directions, the four main directions, the four cardinal directions, are going to really affect the light intensity that you're going to be getting through. So it's good to start talking about that rather than just bright or slightly dimmer or darker. It's light intensity that we need to be thinking of. And let's touch about how the light is coming in. So most people might not be aware of this, but a lot of at least the more modern windows that you might have in your house have got certain filters which actually to a certain point will block some of that light coming through the windows. I know before you say this, you're still in the game, but my window is still bright. I can still see light in here. But again, remember, we need to stop thinking how we recognize light, but how the plants recognize light, yeah? There's a slight difference here. So regardless, even if you've got older windows, the fact that the light needs to go through that layer of glass is going to affect it to some degree. So bear that in mind. Also, anything else that's in front of that window is going to affect the light coming through. And by that, I'm talking about, say you've got an open window or a closed window, but a clear glass window, but you've got a bug screen over that. That is going to affect the light levels that are coming in through the window and then going through the glass, going through the bug screen, and then landing onto your plant. Those photons that we were talking about before that are landing onto the plant's surfaces, leaves, stems, all of these things. Same thing goes if you've got a net curtain or a darker curtain. All of these things are going to affect the light level that's actually going to be reaching your plant whilst it comes through that window. And I got my little iPad for this next bit because I'm not one that generally will be thinking about things in lux or lumens at all. Generally, I will be, during my planting journey, I've been mainly working with either par or foot candles, and I know a lot of people might not always use those. So I'll try to kind of bring it into something that's a bit more accessible, a bit more understandable for everybody, even if you're just starting off and you just want to go down those routes because you feel more comfortable talking in those terms. So there is something about to be said. I was talking before about downloading an app for your phone that it will be doing the cardinal directions. It might also be a good idea if you want, and again, there's loads of free ones that you can download where they will kind of measure light. Now, there's a whole host of kind of caveats that I might want to put here is that they might not work as well as very expensive scientific machinery, and I know for a lot of people that is price prohibitive. Generally, some people might eventually graduate to that because they really want to fall down that rabbit hole and they want to have a true scientific instrument to be able to measure light. But for the vast majority of people, they are more than happy to download something that they can use on their phone, even if they know that it's not 100% accurate. So there are a whole bunch of different apps that you can use to measure light. One of my favorites I will put on the top there. And I have mentioned this before, and this is available on both platforms, both Android and the Apple Store. So both of those you can both of those platforms you can get this app from. And you can set it to different types of measurings. I think it even does lumens. I might be wrong, but I think it even does lumens, and it does a par and does all of those things. And it does tell you about how to get it a bit more accurate, which is what most people kind of struggle with sometimes when it comes to their devices. You can buy little accessories you can put on your phone to make the light a bit more diffuse, and it can work a bit more accurately. Or, and this is what I love about them, they also tell you that you can do that with just a strip of paper and some sellotape. So there is a free or cheap kind of, if you've got paper and some sellotape, you can probably do it at home without having to buy specialist machinery for it, basically. So that is quite good. But if you're going to be using something like Lux, in indoor kind of approximations, you're looking at low light. What would be classed as low light would be between 100 to 200 lux. 500 to 1,000 would be about medium, and 1,000 to 2,000 plus would be bright indirect light. And the other thing that we need to be talking about here is light intensity and light duration. So the duration bit is something that a lot of people don't always talk about, and it is equally as important as light intensity. So I'll give you an example for a window. Say you've got a window somewhere, and the lights, obviously, as the sun moves across the sky, depending on the time of the year as well, say we're talking about the summer, you might get a lot of bright indirect lights, or bright light to begin with, and bright indirect light, high levels, and then it will drop to kind of medium levels, or maybe very low light as the sun is setting. So say I am the window, the sun would rise this way around, and you can see the light levels that are going to be coming through and the intensity during the duration of the time. About midday, the light would be above where I am. So that light level will drop to a certain point because the sun is not directly in front of the window. And as the day progresses and the sun goes behind that window, the light levels will get even lower. So there is that to be said. The only kind of plants, and this is generally something we don't do for a lot of house plants. So if you think of garden plants who need bright light for X amount of hours, are the ones usually that you will put in the middle of a garden somewhere, because they have got the chance of getting as much of that brightness of the sun for the longest duration of the day. So depending on how kind of in-depth you want to go on this, you could, if you've got a window and you've got a lot of your plants on there, this is really easy if you've got the one window. It still takes some time, but it's easier if you've just got the one window, or a lot of your windows look to the same direction, because this would apply for, so if I've got 5 different windows that are all south facing on the south facing side of my house, maybe the front of my house, which is my case, I would know that if I measure it for one window, it's likely going to apply to all of those windows on the same side of the house. Again, there's caveats here if there's trees, things like that, but assume that there's nothing in front of these windows. I could go and do a quick measurement in the early morning, and then do another measurement in the late morning, one at lunch, one in early afternoon, one in late afternoon, and one towards the evening. And I could jot these things down, and then I can see how the light levels will change for all of those windows throughout the day. Now, the tricky thing here is this would change throughout the year, because obviously the light levels don't always necessarily drop. They might do if you live in somewhere like in the UK, where in the winter, by and large, we're quite great for most of the days and for most parts of the days. But say you live in sunnier locations, the light kind of intensity won't always necessarily change, but, and this is where the duration comes in, the time that those kind of intensity levels will play out tends to be shorter, because the sun moves around much faster than it would do in the summer when you've got long days. So I'll give you a very extreme example of here in the UK. So for instance, and this is not kind of super scientifically accurate, but this is what I'm experiencing. I could kind of look at the times, but in the depths of summer, when we've got some of the longest days here in the UK, it might start getting bright in here in the conservatory, because obviously it's all glass. It might start getting bright at like 4:30 or 5 a.m. And there will be light above until about 9:30 or 10 p.m. It's a long period of time to have light available to the plants. Obviously the intensity is going to fluctuate throughout the day, but the light's available to them for all of those hours. Duration, remember we're talking about duration. Now, in the winter, we're getting to the point now where it's getting shorter days and darker. I might have light coming into the conservatory at around 7 a.m. and it might already be disappearing at 5 or 6 p.m. And for the people in the UK, they know that we're still in autumn. That's going to get worse. But you see what I mean about the duration. And it's not just the duration as a whole for the whole day, like how many hours of light you're going to get, but also the duration. Remember what I was talking about before, when you're going to take measurements first thing in the morning, mid-morning, lunch, all of these things. The duration of those periods is going to get longer or shorter depending on the season that you are in. So I know this is a lot, but again, I am talking to the people that want to do some of the bare minimum and also the people that want to be a bit extra. So I'm giving you all some options to kind of play around to not just see about intensity, but also duration of light. Bringing this back and tying this a bit more with grow lights, and this is something that a lot of people won't always make the connection with. So what you can do, even if you have got lower intensity grow lights, some of the cheaper grow lights, you can still utilize them to the same level, because you're not just looking at intensity, you're looking at duration. And those two things work together, yes? So if you know that a window would be getting, say, 400, say 700 par, remember we were talking about par, throughout most of the day, or at least, again, duration of the intensity as well, for like 4 hours of the day. And that's predominantly kind of where the plant will use up most of that light, because it's got more of it available to it. If you've got a grow light that can only do 400 par, the difference for you then, if you're using it in the winter, for example, which is a time where a lot of people will use their grow lights, not exclusively, but where a lot of people will use their grow lights, is don't just have it on for 4 hours. Have it on for 8 hours, have it on for 10 hours, have it on for 12 hours. Do you see what I mean? Because you can still have lower intensity, but if it's for a longer duration, the overall light that the plant can receive, remember those photons that we were talking about when it hits its structures, are still going to equate to the same as it would have been for those 4 hours of that 700 par that we were talking about there. So there are ways around kind of gaming the system. The very quick little caveat that I will say here is there is a very high kind of, for some people, there's a very high kind of drive to just go, well, I'm just going to leave my grow lights on all the time. Plants do need rest. So there is going to need, plants do need a few hours where the light switches off. As it would do normally in nature, there is no place in the, I will stop myself there, because I know some of the very northern kind of nations do get full days of sun, but by and large, they've got very specific plants that grow in those locations, not our tropical plants. Remember, we need to remember where these plants come from. But let's demystify a bit more of what bright indirect, medium, and low light might mean. So bright indirect is really easy for a lot of people to kind of understand, in the sense from Windows I'm talking about now. And I know this is very controversial, but in its most basic form, if you're doing it on kind of Windows, think about your more south-facing windows, again, northern hemisphere, north-facing windows for the southern hemisphere, and think of a window that's getting an awful lot of light, but you've got a sheer, something like a net curtain. That would be bright indirect, yeah? So some of the plants that do really, really well with this would be things like the monsteras, like the obvious Monstera deliciosa, your alocasias, some of your ficuses will do really, really well with some of those locations. So medium light, thinking about the same south-facing window, if that's all you've got to use, then move your plants a few feet back, or like a meter or two back from that south-facing window with the sheer curtain, and you'll get more of that medium light. Or Conversely, you then go to, in the southern hemisphere, your northern windows and put it very close, or in the southern hemisphere, you'll move that to your south-facing windows and move it further back. To see what I mean? So you're utilizing your weakest windows right in front of the weakest windows will give you more of that bright light, not bright, medium light that you might need. And pulling that back is how you would achieve it on your brightest of windows. Now, low light, and this is a bit of a myth that a lot of people don't always necessarily kind of think of, is there are certain plants that are sold as low light plants. Very few plants, if any, will thrive in low light conditions. They are just dying slower. And if you think about most of the plants that will do well in this, and actually I should have mentioned a couple of examples for the medium light windows. I think calatheas, peperomias will do really well in that. But for low light, the examples that most people have for low light plants would be things like your ZZ plants, your sansevieras. Take a moment, please, if you haven't done this already, and see where both of those plants specifically, which are the kind of main ones that are being touted as low light plants, are from. Yes, Africa. So yes, they might not be in the middle of desert, but a lot of the times they might be quite close to quite bright conditions. So if you really, really want to do something like low light, you can still be near a window, but maybe somewhere where the light doesn't directly hit it for very long hours of the day. So I, by and large, would say be very careful with the edict of low light, because especially if you're just using your eyes, this is where your apps are going to come in really useful. If you put something in a location in your house where you think there is low light conditions, if you've done what I've suggested earlier on in this video and downloaded the light meter apps, go and with the app, not just with your eyes, go and measure the light that plant, say if this plant was in a dark location, I'll kind of put my phone here and see the light level that it's receiving. If it's reading anything between 0 and 10, for the plant, that is not low light, that is no light. So adjust accordingly. Be very, very careful with low light, because a lot of people always focus about how difficult it is to pin down bright indirect light. But for me, equally troublesome is low light condition. Now let's touch a bit more on the grow lights of it all, basically. And a lot of people, myself included, will use a lot of grow lights. And I'm kind of looking at the side here. I don't know if I can bring it in so you can kind of see it. It's off now because otherwise it would be blinding the camera. But grow lights can be really, really useful in the winter. I spoke about this specific Claria light from the guys at Grow Gang in a different video. And if you wanted to get any of their products, which was really, really good, I still swear by most of them. I've got a link down in the description below, but these have been a godsend for me. These and a lot of my other grow lights have been a godsend for me throughout the winter months. But you need to remember with grow lights that you're going to have two main options. So one, you'll get the pinky light one, so the blue and the red combined, or you'll get the full spectrum grow lights, which tend to be a whiter light. Barring the obvious difference in terms of color between the two of them, and also how much you can put up with the difference in that color, there is something to be said, and there's more and more research that's coming out on this as to why full spectrum grow lights tend to work a bit better than the purple light grow lights out there. Now, it's not to say, because I've had a couple of people in recent videos saying that I've grown my plants in the kind of purple lights completely fine. That's fantastic. Keep doing you. If they work for you, absolutely fantastic. But if you aren't one of those people that wants to kind of do minor adjustments to figure out if that's doing, or you've got a very kind of dear plant to yourself that you don't want to risk, I would always kind of advise to go towards that full spectrum light. Your plant will get more benefit from it as well. The science behind the kind of purple light versus the full spectrum, the purple light, the red and the blue wavelengths of light, if I'm not mistaken here, is what some of the original research was coming up as. That is the only light that the plant could use, because obviously because of its green color, it cannot utilize, I think, the yellow-green spectrum of light, so why give it to it? It's a lot more nuanced than that, and that's what the more recent research is coming up with, saying that no, it still needs that full spectrum of light in order to photosynthesize as effectively as possible. Now you also need to be looking at the PAR that I talked about in the very beginning of the video. There's also a very, very good guide. I think it was, is it called the Houseplant Journal? And it was done by a content creator, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll put it down in the description below, the link where you can kind of find it on the website. And it's kind of broken it down by certain plant types in terms of what PAR levels are likely to be the best to use. And that's a good place for you to start with. It's not going to be 100% accurate for every condition for every person, but it gives you a good starting point. And I think a lot of people might already be aware of it. For the people that don't, I will put it in the description down below. But yeah, you need to be thinking about PAR when it comes to your grow lights. And for a lot of people, when they're buying certain more expensive grow lights, they'll look at some things that they usually have that talks about PAR and all of these things. And that is a good guide, but make sure that you're getting a light that has enough PAR, even at its max, or that the PAR at its lowest isn't too bright for your plants. That is equally important when you are looking to purchase some of these products. If you are getting a grow light that has got low PAR levels but just might be enough for your plant, all you need to do is bring that light closer to a plant. So for instance, I will bring my handy dandy kind of grow light here. I know obviously this I'm pointing at plants, but say for instance this is a plant. If I have it here, which is really, really close, it would be getting more PAR. If I move it further back, it's going to be getting less PAR. So you could play around with that intensity by how close your plant is. Obviously, the closer you have your plant to a light source, even if it is a grow light, there is a higher chance that it might get some leaf burn. Because again, something you need to remember, if you're giving a plant something like a grow light, even in the winter, it means that it's still likely going to be growing. And guess what happens when plants grow? They go upwards towards the potential light that you have there. So bear that in mind, that it might be okay for it now, but as it starts growing and gets closer to it, there's more of a chance that those newer leaves are potentially going to burn a bit from too much light because they're getting closer to it. They're getting even closer to it. And again, I'm going to harp on about volume, because volume isn't just the light intensity, but it's the duration of light. So think of it a bit like watering. There was a point when people were first starting off, they're just like, just do a little dribble of water, just do a little dribble of water. And people were just like, no, that's not enough. You need to be flushing your growing media so it kind of fully saturates, and then that will give it enough moisture to kind of keep growing. The light thing is the same. You can't just do a little drab of light. You need to be doing it for longer periods of time to be able to get that duration. You need that volume of light, volume of photons hitting the plants like we were talking about before in order for it to make a difference. Obviously, adjust accordingly, because if you give it too much volume, that could also be issues. But this is something that you're going to have to play around with and figure out what works for you. There is, for the true geeks and nerds out there, there is something called the daily light integer, I think. And that is that kind of total volume of light that's going to be happening. Think of it like total calories consumed by the plant. In this terms, the calories being the level of light that it's getting. So dive into that if you want. I'm not going to bore everybody with this too much there, but that's a very interesting metric that you could kind of use. I think one of the apps that I'm talking about for the light measurement does have that, if I'm not mistaken. But let's talk about the fact that light levels don't necessarily mean the same thing across the board. One size does not fit all. So, example, the Anthurium clarinervium, for instance, it might be an understory plant, but it still needs bright indirect light, preferably diffuse light. So if you're doing this against a window, it'd be something that's growing through a curtain. If you're doing it with a grow light, you would need X amount of light coming in throughout the day, but maybe on the slightly lower end of bright indirect light. Again, utilizing that website that I've linked down below will give you a good starting point to where you need to begin. Flip side of that is calatheas, which again are an understory plant, but they will fry super quickly in bright, harsh lights. So they definitely need something there to like block some of the direct rays of the sun hitting their leaves. This does not mean that they still don't appreciate decent light. So this is the big thing that you need to remember, is that they still will appreciate more decent light. And I'll bring it back to what I was saying before. No plant will thrive in low light. They can tolerate low light. And as a lot of previous content creators have said, and I would agree full-heartedly, is a lot of those plants tolerate low light in the way that they are just dying slower because of lack of light. If a plant is slow to grow, it's slow to die. So you're giving it barely any light, it will do okay, or it just looks like it's not doing very much, but it's not dying, it's surviving in the light. It's surviving is probably the best word you can say there, but it's not living its best life. And ultimately, it might still die in 2-3 years' time. It's just slowly dying. Just remember that. At this point, you also need to be thinking about and kind of how you do a light acclimation, because a lot of people might turn around and look at some of the plants in here and just go, how are they surviving in your space? Obviously now it's winter, so everything's grey and moody, but in the summer this place can get very bright. I'm doing the most with grow lights. Apologies if some of my videos in the autumn and winter are a bit on the darker side. Unlike a lot of the other content creators who are filming within household conditions and they can kind of control lights a bit more, I am kind of reliant on kind of artificial lights that I've got blaring at me and whatever the sun decides to do overhead. So that's why you might see fluctuating light levels in my videos to bring it back into this as well. But yes, you need to do acclimation, because a lot of the plants, some people are just like, how is that plant not burning when it's that close? Because I've acclimated it slowly. So you could give a plant more light by kind of exposing it to that more light slowly. So gardeners are used to kind of doing this a bit more when they talk about hardening off plants, usually in the springtime. And it's not just for the colder weather, based on if you're growing a little seedling or a little plantlet indoors. If you move it directly outside in springtime, the cold might kill it or the light level might kill it, because both of those things will change drastically between indoors and outdoors. So indoors, you'll never get the light levels that you will get outdoors, and temperature-wise, obviously, will be different. Indoors will be a lot warmer than what likely beginning of middle of spring might have outside. So I'm not going to touch on the heat on this point, but for the light level, how people acclimate it is you bring out your plant for a couple of hours, put it in a location that has lower light levels than you would normally give it. Bring it back in, give it the same light for the rest of the day, and kind of gradually build it up to that. You might not want to do exactly that for your house plants, but if you know that ultimately you want to put your plant that has been saying in a relatively low to medium light situation somewhere that is brighter, if you jump that up immediately, you might get some leaf burns and all these things. Move it slightly closer to that bright indirect light, so better light than what it's already getting, but closer to better light. First, leave it there for a few weeks, and then move it closer, and eventually getting it to that location will be great. Conversely, if your plant is getting too much light and you want to give it less light, don't just go immediately back like that. Just do it a bit more gradually and move it slowly and slowly to lower light levels, and that will be better. Obviously, adjusting other things. If you're moving from a medium to low light situation to a bright indirect situation, your watering might increase because there's more light available to the plant, so it's more actively growing. Or if you're going from bright indirect to lower light levels, you're going to likely have to be watering a bit less. So bear those things in mind. Some things to remember. Plants do not see light in the same way that we do, which is why it's important to talk about things like DLI, PAR, all of those PPFDs, all of those things over lux or lumens, because that's how we kind of can see light. That is not how they can kind of appreciate that source, basically, of energy, those photons that are hitting the plant. So it is a good idea to just get one of those apps. They're free, they don't cost anything. I'm definitely not making anything off me telling you to get this, and there's a lot of us that have always been saying get those because it helps as a bit of a crutch to begin with. There will be a point when you've done it long enough that you can kind of know roughly how things work, but to begin with, it's a good kind of way to help you get there. Bright indirect light is measurable. It's something that you can see, and if you don't want to do everything that I've just talked about, you could do the simple thing that I've mentioned on other videos, is if you know a plant that needs bright indirect light is in a window or in a location or under a grow light and is growing absolutely spectacularly, guess what I'm going to tell you to do? Get that free Light Meter app, and go and measure what light level it is getting and replicate that for other plants that need similar kind of conditions. So if you've got a monstera that's doing great in a specific window, in a specific location, grab the light meter, check what that level of light is, be aware of the duration of light as well. And if you've got other monstera species, give them the same thing. And that's a great place to start. And I think I need to say this. I don't know, like, there is some kind of weird subsect of our community where they consider like lights, kind of grow lights, cheating. It's more like an ally than a cheat, if that makes sense. It just helps you in those winter months. And I keep in mind, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. I know a lot of people within the community that also use grow lights year round, especially if they've got lower light locations within their house. If they give it a grow light, it would help. Or those in between seasons as well, like spring and summer, spring and autumn, sorry, where you supplement light rather than just giving that plant only grow lights. You will supplement the existing natural light that might be coming in with some grow lights to extend that duration of light. So say for instance your light are going off, or the sun is disappearing into the sky by about 7 p.m. But in the summer, you know what? My plants are getting some light levels until 9 p.m., 10 p.m. You could supplement for those extra hours with a slightly dimmer grow light. But hopefully that demystifies lights a bit more. I might have mystified people more. I don't know. I've tried to make this as approachable as possible, but it is an intense topic. There are scientists that literally will study this specific element entirely. So this is an intense topic that you can go into a lot of detail with. But hopefully this makes it a bit easier to understand. What are your thoughts? Did you know some of this stuff? Did I teach you something new? Have I sent you off in different directions now to do further research? Please do let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts, as always. But in the meantime, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.